If you had asked me a few months ago, I would have told you that I was on the fast track to success at my accounting firm. I had been putting in consistent, dedicated effort for years, constantly taking on extra projects, working late nights, and proving my worth time and time again. So when a prestigious management position opened up, I knew I was a shoo-in for the promotion. My name is David Grayson. I'm 34 years old, and I've been working at the same accounting firm for the past 8 years. When I first started, I was just a junior-level analyst, fresh out of college and eager to prove myself. But through hard work, dedication, and a relentless drive to succeed, I've managed to steadily climb the corporate ladder, taking on increasingly challenging projects and earning the respect of my colleagues. Throughout my tenure, I've always taken pride in my work, consistently delivering high-quality results and going the extra mile to ensure that my clients were satisfied. And when that management position opened up, I felt a surge of excitement and anticipation. This was my chance to finally be recognized for all the hard work I had put in, to be rewarded for my dedication and my contributions to the firm. But as my supervisor, Sarah, called me into her office that fateful day, the excitement quickly turned to confusion and then to outright disbelief. "I'm sorry, David," she said, her voice laced with a hint of sympathy, "but the position has been offered to someone else." I sat there stunned, my mind racing to try and make sense of what she was telling me. But I was the top candidate," I stammered, unable to keep the frustration and disappointment from seeping into my tone. "I've been putting in the extra hours, taking on the toughest assignments, and delivering results that have helped drive this company forward. How could I not get the promotion?" Sarah sighed, her expression etching with a mix of regret and something else that I couldn't quite place. "I know, David," she said, "and I truly appreciate all the hard work you've done. But the decision has been made, and it's out of my hands." As the realization sank in, a sense of betrayal began to take hold. I had poured my heart and soul into this company. And now, when I was finally within reach of the recognition and advancement I deserved, it had been snatched away from me. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this story, that there was a hidden agenda at play. "Sarah," I said, leaning forward in my chair, my gaze fixed on her face, "who got the promotion?" She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting away from mine. It was Mark," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark. The name sent a jolt of anger coursing through me. He was a colleague of mine, someone I had worked closely with on several projects over the years, and while he was undoubtedly competent, he had never displayed the same level of dedication or initiative as I had. In fact, there had been times when I had carried the team, picking up the slack when Mark fell behind or cut corners. And now, he had been awarded the promotion that I had rightfully earned. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and I could feel the resentment building inside me. "That's not right, Sarah," I said, my voice low and steady. "You and I both know that I'm the better candidate for this position. So, what's really going on here?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her gaze still averted from mine. I could see the conflict playing out on her face, the internal struggle between her desire to be honest and the pressure she was likely feeling from above. "Look, David," she finally said, her voice low and weighted with unease. "I don't want to get into the specifics, but there were factors that played a role in the decision-making process." The way she spoke, the way she avoided my gaze, it all clicked into place. There was something more to this, something that she wasn't telling me, and in that moment, I knew that I had to get to the bottom of it, no matter what it took. "Sarah," I said, leaning forward, my eyes narrowed with determination, "I need you to tell me the truth. What's really going on here?" She hesitated for a moment, her fingers fidgeting nervously with a pen on her desk. I can't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been instructed not to discuss the details of the decision-making process." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Instructed? By whom? And why would they want to keep the truth hidden? Sensing my growing frustration, Sarah continued, "Look, David, I know this must be incredibly disappointing for you. Believe me, I wish I could tell you more, but my hands are tied. All I can say is that the decision was made at a higher level, and it's out of my control." Higher level? That could only mean one thing. This was coming down from the executive suite, from the very top of the leadership hierarchy. And if that was the case, then there was clearly more to this story than met the eye. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing as I tried to piece together the puzzle. Could it be that Mark had somehow manipulated the system, using his connections or influence to secure the promotion? Or was there an even more sinister plot at play, one that involved corruption or cronyism within the upper echelons of the company? Whatever the case, I knew that I couldn't just let this go. My years of hard work and dedication couldn't be erased by a single, seemingly arbitrary decision. I had to fight back, to uncover the truth and expose the wrongdoing that had cost me the promotion. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm and resolute, "I understand that you're in a difficult position, but I need you to at least give me a hint. Is there anything you can tell me that might help me figure out what's really going on here?" She hesitated for a moment, then let out a resigned sigh. "Look, all I can say is that there have been some issues with Mark's work in the past, but I'm not at liberty to discuss the details." "Issues? What kind of issues?" My curiosity was piqued, and I could feel the wheels in my mind spinning as I tried to connect the dots. "Sarah, please," I pleaded, "I need to know more. If there are legitimate concerns about Mark's performance, then that needs to be taken into account. This isn't just about me. It's about ensuring that the right person gets the job, for the good of the company." She fidgeted uncomfortably, her eyes darting around the room. I can't, David. I'm sorry, but I've said too much already. You'll have to figure this out on your own." With that, she stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I opened my mouth to protest, to demand more information, but she held up a hand to stop me. "I really am sorry, David," she said, her voice tinged with genuine regret. "I wish I could do more, but my hands are tied. You're just going to have to trust that the decision was made in the best interest of the company." As I watched her leave the room, I felt a wave of frustration and determination wash over me. There was no way I was going to let this stand. I had poured my heart and soul into this job, and I wasn't about to let some shady backroom dealings cost me the promotion I rightfully deserved. I knew that I was going to have to do some digging to uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried. And as I sat there, my mind racing with possibilities, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim resolve. This was a fight I was determined to win, no matter the cost. As I left Sarah's office, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I was deeply disappointed and frustrated by the unfair decision to pass me over for the promotion. But on the other, I was filled with a growing sense of determination and purpose. There was clearly more to this story than met the eye, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I knew that Sarah was holding something back, that there were details she was unwilling or unable to share. And if I was going to have any chance of reclaiming what was rightfully mine, I was going to have to do some digging of my own. The first step was to retrace my steps, to carefully examine the timeline of events leading up to the promotion decision. I pored over my performance reviews, my project reports, and any other documentation that could shed light on my qualifications and contributions to the company. As I reviewed the materials, a pattern began to emerge, one that suggested a clear and troubling disparity between my own achievements and the company's decision-making process. Time and time again, I had received glowing feedback from my clients and colleagues, with numerous commendations for my exceptional work and my ability to consistently deliver results. Yet, when it came time for the promotion, all of that seemed to have been swept aside in favor of Mark, a colleague who, by all accounts, had not demonstrated the same level of dedication or expertise. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to reach out to some of my other coworkers, colleagues who I trusted and knew I could confide in. One by one, they echoed Sarah's vague references to issues with Mark's performance, hinting at a pattern of sloppy work, missed deadlines, and a generally lackadaisical attitude towards his responsibilities. As I pieced together these accounts, a disturbing picture began to emerge. It seemed that Mark had been coasting by, relying on the goodwill of his superiors to overlook his shortcomings, while I had been working tirelessly each day to deliver exceptional results. And then, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Through a series of discreet inquiries, I learned that Mark had been engaging in a close personal relationship with one of the company's senior vice presidents, the very person who had ultimately signed off on the promotion decision. It was a classic case of cronyism, a blatant abuse of power and influence to secure a coveted position for an undeserving candidate. And as the realization dawned on me, I felt a surge of righteous indignation coursing through my veins. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up for integrity, for fairness, and for the principles that were supposed to guide the company's decision-making process. And I knew that I couldn't let it stand. With a renewed sense of purpose, I set about meticulously documenting every scrap of evidence I could find. I gathered performance reviews, client feedback, and any other materials that could corroborate my own track record of excellence. And I began to quietly reach out to other colleagues, sounding them out to see if they too had witnessed the kinds of troubling patterns I had uncovered. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of righteous indignation. This wasn't just about me and my own personal ambitions. It was about exposing a systemic problem within the company, one that had been allowed to fester for far too long. And so, I began to formulate a plan of attack. I would present my evidence to the company's Human Resources Department, making a formal complaint about the promotion decision and demanding a thorough investigation. I knew that it would be an uphill battle, that I would be going up against powerful forces within the company's leadership. But as I steeled my resolve, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. After all, I had the truth on my side, and if I could just get the right people to listen, I was confident that I could expose the rot at the heart of the company's decision-making process. It was a risky gambit, to be sure, but I was done playing by the rules. This was my career, my future, and I was damned if I was going to let it be taken from me through a blatant abuse of power and influence. With a deep breath, I gathered my evidence and set off to confront the HR department, ready to fight for the promotion I had rightfully earned. As I marched into the HR department, a mix of nerves and adrenaline coursed through my veins. I knew that I was about to take on a formidable foe, one that had the backing of the company's most powerful players. But I also knew that I had the truth on my side, and that if I could just get the right people to listen, I had a fighting chance of exposing the corruption that had cost me the promotion. I took a deep breath and laid out my case to the HR manager, a stern-faced woman named Eliza. I methodically presented the evidence I had gathered, detailing the discrepancies in Mark's performance record and the concerning relationship he had cultivated with the senior vice president. This is a clear-cut case of cronyism and abuse of power, I argued, my voice steady and resolute. Mark was given the promotion not because he was the most qualified candidate, but because he had the right connections within the company's leadership. And that's a betrayal of the very principles this organization is supposed to uphold. Eliza listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration as she reviewed the documents I had provided. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, and I held my breath, hoping that she would see the gravity of the situation and be moved to take action. Finally, she looked up, her gaze meeting mine with a hint of sympathy. "I understand your frustration, David," she said, her voice measured and diplomatic. "And I can assure you that we take these kinds of allegations very seriously. But you have to understand that this is a complex issue, and there are a lot of factors at play that may not be immediately apparent." I felt a surge of disappointment and frustration. Was she really going to dismiss my evidence and let this injustice stand? "With all due respect, Ms. Eliza," I replied, "the evidence speaks for itself. Mark is unqualified for this position, and he only got it because of his personal connections. Isn't that the very definition of corruption?" Eliza sighed and leaned back in her chair, her expression weary. "Look, David, I hear what you're saying, and I don't doubt that you believe what you're telling me. But the truth is, the decision-making process for this promotion was made at a much higher level, and it's not my place to second-guess it." My heart sank. So Sarah had been telling the truth. This was coming down from the executive suite, and the HR department was essentially powerless to intervene. "But that's not fair," I protested, unable to keep the desperation from creeping into my voice. "You have the evidence right here, clear as day. How can you just ignore it?" Eliza held up a hand, silencing me. "I'm not ignoring it, David," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "But the reality is that these kinds of decisions often involve factors that aren't readily apparent to those on the outside. There may be considerations at play that you're simply not privy to." I felt a surge of frustration and disbelief. How could she be so willing to dismiss the blatant corruption I had uncovered? "So what? You're just going to let this stand?" I asked, my voice tinged with a hint of desperation. "You're going to allow the company to reward incompetence and cronyism over genuine merit and hard work?" Eliza sighed and shook her head. "I understand your frustration, David. I really do. But the decision has been made, and it's not my place to overturn it. The best I can do is to ensure that the proper channels are in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. I felt my heart sink as the realization dawned on me. The HR department, the very entity that was supposed to uphold fairness and integrity within the company, was powerless to intervene. They were essentially beholden to the whims of the executive suite, forced to rubber-stamp decisions that were clearly tainted by corruption and nepotism. "This isn't right," I muttered, the words barely above a whisper. "This isn't right at all." Eliza offered me a sympathetic look. "I know, David. Believe me, I wish I could do more. But my hands are tied. The best I can suggest is that you take your concerns up the chain of command, directly to the executives who made this decision." I nodded, my mind already racing with a new plan of attack. If the HR department couldn't or wouldn't help me, then I would have to find another way to expose the truth and get the justice I deserved. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. With a renewed sense of determination, I thanked Eliza for her time and made my way out of the HR office, already plotting my next move. As I left the HR department, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I was deeply frustrated and disappointed by Eliza's unwillingness to take action, but I was also filled with a renewed sense of determination. If the HR department wasn't going to help me, then I would have to find another way to expose the corruption that had cost me the promotion. I knew that I couldn't give up, not when the stakes were this high. This wasn't just about me and my own personal ambitions. It was about standing up for what was right, for ensuring that the company's decision-making process was fair and unbiased. And I was damned if I was going to let a bunch of corporate cronies undermine the very principles that were supposed to guide this organization. With a newfound sense of purpose, I set about crafting my next move. I knew that I would need to go over the heads of the HR department and take my case directly to the company's leadership. And if they refused to listen, then I would have to find another way to shine a light on the corruption that was plaguing the organization. As I mulled over my options, an idea began to take shape in my mind. I would reach out to the local media, pitching them on the story of the unfair promotion and the blatant cronyism that had allowed an undeserving candidate to leapfrog over a more qualified employee. If I could get the story out there, generate enough public pressure, maybe then the company's leadership would be forced to take notice and address the issue. It was a risky gambit, to be sure, but I knew that I had to try. I couldn't just sit back and let this injustice stand, not when I had the evidence to back up my claims. And so, with a deep breath, I set about contacting the local news outlets, pitching them on the story and laying out the details of my case. At first, the journalists were skeptical, questioning whether I had the proof to back up my allegations. But as I walked them through the evidence I'd gathered, the performance reviews, the client feedback, the damning details about Mark's relationship with the senior VP, their interest began to peak. "This is a pretty explosive story," one of the reporters, a savvy veteran named Emily, told me. "If what you're saying is true, then it could be a huge scandal for the company." I nodded, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "It is true, Emily," I said, my voice firm and resolute, "and I'm willing to go on the record to expose the corruption that's been happening at the highest levels of this organization." Emily regarded me for a moment, her keen eyes assessing the sincerity of my words. "All right, David," she said finally. "I'm going to look into this further, and if the evidence checks out, we'll put together a story that will blow the lid off this whole thing." I felt a surge of relief and gratitude, but I also knew that the battle was far from over. The company's leadership was not going to take kindly to having their dirty laundry aired in public, and I knew that they would likely do everything in their power to try and discredit me and bury the story. But I was undaunted. I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. Over the next few days, Emily and her team worked tirelessly, corroborating the details of my story and digging deeper into the company's inner workings. They interviewed other employees, scoured through financial records, and even managed to obtain a copy of the senior VP's calendar, which revealed the frequency and nature of his meetings with Mark. As the evidence mounted, Emily's confidence in the story grew, and she kept me updated on the progress, assuring me that they were going to make sure the truth was heard. Finally, the day of the big reveal arrived, and as I watched the news report unfold on my computer screen, I felt a mix of pride, vindication, and trepidation. The story was explosive, detailing the blatant cronyism and corruption that had allowed an undeserving candidate to secure the promotion, all at the expense of a hard-working and deserving employee, me. The company's leadership, blindsided by the public exposure, was forced to respond, and in a desperate attempt to save face, they reluctantly acknowledged the wrongdoing and promised a full investigation. But I knew that the damage had been done, and that the reputation of the organization would never be the same. As for me, I felt a sense of relief and satisfaction wash over me. I had fought the good fight, and I had emerged victorious, my integrity and my hard work finally recognized and validated. And while the road ahead might still be rocky, I knew that I had taken the first step towards reclaiming what was rightfully mine. In the aftermath of the explosive news report, the company's leadership was forced to act quickly, scrambling to contain the damage and mitigate the fallout from the scandal. Within days, they had announced a full investigation into the promotion decision, promising to get to the bottom of the allegations of cronyism and corruption. And as the probe progressed, the evidence I had uncovered only continued to mount, painting an increasingly damning picture of the backroom dealings and unethical behavior that had taken place. Mark, the once favored candidate, found himself under intense scrutiny, his past performance issues and questionable relationship with the senior VP coming to light. It was a stunning reversal of fortune, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as I watched the tables turn. Meanwhile, the company's public image took a major hit, with customers and shareholders expressing outrage at the revelations of corruption within the organization. The leadership, realizing the gravity of the situation, knew that they had to act swiftly and decisively to regain the trust of the public and their own employees. And so, in a move that surprised even me, they reached out with an offer. The promotion was mine if I was still willing to accept it. I'll admit, I was hesitant at first. After all, this was the same company that had tried to sweep the wrongdoing under the rug, that had been willing to let an undeserving candidate take the position I had rightfully earned. Why should I trust them now when they were clearly acting out of desperation rather than a genuine commitment to fairness and integrity? But as I thought it over, I realized that this was my chance to right a wrong, to reclaim what was mine and to send a message that corruption and cronyism would not be tolerated. And so, with a mix of cautious optimism and steely determination, I accepted the offer. The transition back into the role was not without its challenges, however. Many of my colleagues, having witnessed the scandal unfold, viewed me with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. They wondered whether I had truly earned the position, or if I had simply been the beneficiary of a well-timed media expose. But I was undaunted. I knew that I had the skills and the dedication to excel in the role, and I was determined to prove it to everyone around me. Over the next few months, I threw myself into the job, taking on new projects and initiatives with the same unwavering commitment that had defined my career up to that point. And slowly but surely, the doubts and skepticism began to fade. My colleagues, seeing the results of my hard work and the positive impact I was having on the company, began to respect and trust me once again. The clients I worked with sang my praises, and the company's leadership, while still cautious, couldn't deny the value I was bringing to the table. As for Mark, he found himself unceremoniously demoted, his once promising career derailed by the scandal, and the senior VP who had played a role in the corrupt promotion decision. He was forced to resign, his reputation in tatters and his career prospects all but ruined. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure. I didn't take any pleasure in seeing others suffer the consequences of their actions, but I couldn't deny the sense of satisfaction I felt in knowing that justice had been served. The company's leadership had been held accountable, and the message had been sent loud and clear, that corruption and cronyism would not be tolerated no matter how powerful the perpetrators might be. And as I settled into my new role, I couldn't help but feel a sense of renewed purpose and commitment. This wasn't just about my own personal ambitions anymore. It was about ensuring that the company's values and principles were upheld, that the hard work and dedication of its employees were recognized and rewarded. I knew that the road ahead might not be an easy one, that there would likely be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But I was ready, more determined than ever to make a positive impact and to restore the integrity of the organization I had come to call home. As I looked around my new office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had fought the good fight, and I had won. And now it was time to get to work, to make the most of the opportunity I had been given and to prove that I was the right person for the job.